thanks for joining us. Do you want to just start off and just tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you grew up and what your childhood was like?
Yeah, I grew up in San Clemente, down in Orange County, and I feel like my childhood was pretty laid back. It's like a small beach town, so I was always going to the beach, and yeah, it was nice because it was a kind of place where I feel like as a kid I could just go off my bike all day long. It wasn't like growing up in a city like LA or something that I live now, where I don't feel like a small child could just like go off on their own. And so San Clemente to me just felt like this very small kind of community, and I feel like it was a great place to grow up.
And were you into like skateboarding or surfing, or like what kind of sports were you doing?
I was into skateboarding. I was also into surfing. I wasn't very good. I feel like my brother was much better. But I was basically into going to the beach. I was into riding bikes. I got really into like go-karts, go-peds, that kind of stuff. And yeah, kind of a lot of outdoor stuff. I mean, I played a lot of video games at some point, but it was I was kind of always outside doing stuff.
Where did the interest in like cars come? Were you interested early on, like with the go-karts? Like were you watching like F1 or anything like that? Or like what were you kind of like, did your dad have a car, or like what kind of interest were you having back then?
Yeah, I feel like I have always been interested in cars, and that's probably because of my dad. And it's funny because like we didn't really have cool cars when I was growing up, but I felt like I was always working on cars. We always had to like fix our cars. You know, my dad had an old Volkswagen Beetle, and we we're constantly working on that. It's like, all right, time to change the brakes, and we changed the brakes or something. And then my dad had an old 1969 Ford 350 that he's a cabinet maker, and so he'd deliver the cabinets in this old Ford truck, and then that would always break down. So we're always kind of like working on that. And then I remember I got really into go-karts, probably because I was kind of always helping my dad work on cars. And then that was just like another motor to kind of keep cranking on. And so from there, I got go-peds, and then I feel like my aunts and uncles, they all had like dune buggies. And they were always building those and working on those. And so I felt like I was always kind of like around cars in a way, even though it wasn't like the coolest cars, but it's always just kind of like mechanical stuff that we're always doing to them.
And when did you first like pick up a camera? Like were you filming like sports or like anything early on in your life?
I feel like the first time I really picked up a camera was I was leaving middle school and I was going to high school. And I remember at the time, San Clemente High School wasn't as good for academics as it was as the other one, which is in Dana Point. And my mom really wanted me to go to Dana Point High School and not San Clemente High School, even though it was like out of our district. And so she had an old film camera, and she's like, okay, well, why don't you go around and like, I don't know how old I was, probably 15, I guess, 14. And she's like, why don't you go around, take photos with this film camera in black and white, and then we can like hand paint them afterward, and maybe we can like submit them to Dana Point High School and try and like get you an exemption, like an artist exemption, to like kind of go to this better school. And that didn't happen. I mean, the photos probably weren't very good. And so I went to San Clemente High School anyway, which I'm glad I did. But that was like my first introduction where I was like, okay, here's a camera. And then I just walked around by myself in the neighborhood and started taking photos and actually kind of thinking about photography. I never really thought about photography before that. And my dad was actually, he was never a photographer as a profession, but he always took photos, took a ton of like slide photos everywhere he went. He had an old Nikon, and so we would always like project those in the house, like on a slide projector. And so I was always kind of, I guess, interested in photography, but I never tried it. And it wasn't until my mom kind of forced me to do it to try and get into a better high school is when I really discovered it. And after that, when I did end up going to San Clemente High School, I enrolled in photo the first semester, and then I just stayed in it the whole time. And I really started to get interested in photography after that.
So when was like the first time you did like a production, like with other people, like a commercial or a music video? Like what was the first kind of stuff that you started working on?
I feel like a commercial or a music video wasn't until college. So that was probably like 2004 2005, 2006. Before then in high school, my parents, I got this little like video camera, this like Sony video camera, and that's when I started like making all my own little short films. And like we'd go on a family vacation and I would film the whole thing, and then I'd go home and I'd like edit and then like make a little like thing and put on a VHS tape and like send it to all the family. That was probably like the, I don't know, maybe early 2000s or something. And then in high school, I was like doing all sorts of short films. And I was in this sign language class actually, and to like get out of some of the projects that we had to do, I convinced the teacher, like, can I shoot a short film instead, like in sign language? And so it's like the whole short film is in sign language, and that's kind of how I would get out of these other projects. And so that kind of started my first kind of entry into like making things and actually like shooting it and editing it and like thinking about coverage. And so that was kind of my first, I think, entry point. And then, yeah, then it was into college is when I actually started working with like other people that were interested in it as well. Because in high school, I just kind of get friends that were like, oh, hey, can you help me? Or can you do this? Or can you do that? They were never interested in film, but they would help me out. And then, yeah, it was probably 2005, 2006 when I started to go into film classes where I met other people that were also interested in it.
And do you remember like early on, like in your childhood, watching any like films that kind of inspired you and you thought like, maybe I want to do something like that one day?
Yeah, it's interesting because I can think of a few specific ones. There's I feel like as long as I can remember, I've always wanted to get into film. Like even in third grade, I remember I was like, oh, I want to be an actor. But I think that's because I didn't know, I thought that was the only person that was really like working on the film kind of thing, you know. But I was always like obsessed with film and cinema in a way, but I didn't really understand the kind of jobs required to do it until I was like in middle school and then into high school, when I was like, oh, I understood that a cinematographer is kind of just a photographer, you know, in a way. And then I was like, oh, that these two things can work together. And so I feel like when I was really young, though, it was like, I guess I was just into films that kind of my parents were in. It's like, I started getting into action films. It's like Top Gun. I would like watch that opening scene over and over. It's like we had the Betamax and I put it in, and as soon as the opening would be done, I just rewind it and watch it again and rewind it and watch it again. And it'd just be like 20 times. And the same thing with like Edward Scissorhands. Like there was scenes in that movie, I think, where he was like making the ice sculpture and Winona Ryder's like dancing in the snow. It's like, for some reason, I just watched that scene like 20 times in a row. I just rewind it and watch it again, rewind it. And then I would get into like Terminator 2 and Die Hard. And I got really like into these kind of like action movies, and I wasn't really sure why. I didn't really have any other, I didn't really know anything outside of that. And so that's what I kind of became obsessed with. And I feel like my dad, he showed me the movie Bullet with Steve McQueen. There's a car chase in Bullet, and I just thought it was like the best car chase I've ever seen. And from there, it's like, oh, then like Le Mans, like I got into that. And so I kind of, those are kind of my earliest memories of films, I think, and what kind of got me excited about it. But I feel like my grandma was taking me to the movies at 4 or 5 years old. I don't even remember what I was seeing, but she said we go to the movies all the time, and I'd sit there through the whole credit sequence to the very end until, you know, lights turn on. So it's funny when I think back on like what films inspired me, I can only kind of remember like glimpses of it, because I just feel like I've been kind of obsessed with film ever since I can remember.
And what about like recently? Have you, like, I guess throughout the last 30 years or so, have you kind of gravitated towards like a certain director that you like, or like a certain DOP, and like watched all their work? Like what kind of films do you like to watch?
Yeah, now I definitely, my taste has changed. I mean, I'll still watch Terminator 2 any day, but I feel like when I was in college, I had a friend who I met, and I went over to his house, and he had like a whole wall of DVDs, and I was just like, whoa, and there was all these movies I've never even heard of. And he gave me this like stack of films, and he's like, you know, you're not allowed back until you watch all these. And I was like, okay. So I went home and I watched them, and to be honest, I don't even really remember what they were, but it just totally opened my eyes, and it was like, oh my God. And then I started to become really obsessed with Kieslowski and Michael Haneke and Jacques Tati. Wong Kar-wai, Herzog, you know, all the kind of like big art house kind of directors. And it really started to shape what I liked in my taste, you know. And then it's basically European kind of art house cinema I started to get really into, and I loved it. And it was like I couldn't get enough, you know, like Bergman and I had, that was when Netflix was doing like the DVD subscription, and then I would just kind of get as many movies as I can on DVD, and I would just sit there and just kind of like watch as many as I could. So it's like now, I mean, I definitely, I really like Jacques Tati. I feel like I really like a lot of the classic filmmakers like Peter Bogdanovich, and who else have I been watching a lot? Apichatpong, he's a Thai director. I really like his stuff. And it's funny, I feel like I went more from the kind of like fast action movies to movies where like the camera doesn't really move. It's like these like really composed, almost photographs, and like each scene is kind of like a single shot, almost like Roy Anderson. Every scene of his movies is like one single shot, and it's like a lock off. And I started to become kind of obsessed with that kind of filmmaking as well.
Yeah, so going back to like you're doing these short films for your family for fun, and then did you end up, like, how did you turn it into a career? Like, how did you start getting paid to do stuff like filming?
How did I start getting paid? I feel like it was through connections in college.
So did you go to like a film school?
Yeah, I went to Cal State Northridge in the Valley in Los Angeles. And that's where I feel like I've made connections that I still have today. There's a director there, Ryan Reichenfeld, who I started working with and shooting music videos for. And I feel like those kind of free projects slowly started paying me a little bit. You know, it's like started doing one music video and then the next, and all of a sudden it's like, you know, people I knew started getting jobs. And I mean, I first started out as a PA, like when I was in college. Like I met somebody that was a production manager, and he got me on driving box trucks. And so I would drive around and, you know, work on commercials, driving the box truck. And then while I was kind of PAing, and then that kind of started turning into a scene, that's when I kept shooting on the side. And then that kind of slowly started change into, you know, getting hired as a DP.
So when you first went to film school, did you know, I want to be a director of photography, or did you kind of do all the different roles and figure out what you wanted to do?
I think I knew I wanted to be a DP my freshman year of high school, actually. It was pretty early on. I feel like that's like when my mom kind of introduced me into photography, and I was already really obsessed with film. I think at the time I wanted to do special effects because those are like the behind the scenes shows that I would see on TV. It's like, oh, there's a crew that's doing stuff. That looks fun. I want to do special effects. And then when my mom introduced me to photography, that's when I was like, oh, I can be a photographer in film, like a cinematographer. And that's when I started to realize that that role existed. And so, yeah, I think when I was like 14, I wanted to be a DP. I didn't even want to direct. I was like, I don't want to be a director. I just want to be a DP. So it was pretty early on, yeah.
Yeah, because I guess it helps if you know what you want to do early on, and then you can kind of focus your attention onto that specific role.
Yeah, exactly.
So when you were on these sets, like as a PA, were you kind of taking everything in, trying to listen in on the director and the DP, or like watching the gaffer, what he was doing, or listening, like directing your attention to a certain field to be like, all right, what's he doing? Like, were you trying to learn when you were there?
Absolutely. I mean, I feel like the first, it was funny, the first set I was ever on, I remember I was standing there and they were shooting something, and I don't even know who I was standing to. I think it was someone in art department, and I don't know, I just started talking about movies. I just figured everyone's into movies, and it's like, but this is like some like not so great commercial. It's like nobody gives a shit. You know, it's like, in terms of like, at least this person, it's like they're just doing the job. But after that, I was like, oh, I would just hang out with the lighting team. You know, I just kind of kind of go around their truck, and then all of a sudden it'd be like, you know, they'd be like, hey, we need a lighting PA today, and I'd be like, okay, and then I would kind of be the lighting PA, or hey, we need a camera PA today. And so I was always the first one to try and break into those departments and hang out with camera lighting. And I don't know, just you know, explore the truck, you know, see watch what they're doing, watch how they're setting things up, watch how they're lighting, look at the monitor. So I was always really interested in kind of all aspects. I mean, honestly, I think even working in production gives me a nice insight into what they do and what their department's all about, because I feel like if I just dropped onto a set one day and I was just a DP and I never worked in any other department, I feel like that'd be like a disservice. You know, it's like I know how hard production is. I know what they're dealing with, and so kind of helps me give them, you know, not such a hard time when they can't, you know, when something doesn't get pulled off or something. So I liked working in all sorts of departments. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I think it gives you a greater insight into like what everybody's thinking and in terms of, yeah, like how to communicate with people in terms of getting something, like in terms of the look that you want. Did you ever see like maybe bad behavior by a director or a DP that you were like, oh, I wouldn't do that?
Yeah, I mean, I did some second unit on some commercials, and I've seen DPs flip tables over. I've seen directors throw chairs. I've seen some stuff that, you know, and I'm just there doing some second unit, and I'm just like, wow, like to me, that's not how you get what you want. Like now the crew is scared of you, or they, you know, write you off, and they're not gonna, you know, because you're nothing without your crew as a DP or as a director. I mean, you know, the crew's the one doing the work, the actual work for the most part. And if they're not there for you, or they're not going to like help you out in that 11th hour, then, you know, the shot's ruined. I mean, you don't get the shot or whatever. And so whenever I see that kind of behavior of, you know, it's like I think it was, we're in Malaysia and it was in the middle of the night, and I think the video signal cut out for like the 10th time. You know, I don't know, some wireless or some BNC cable was bad, and then the DP just stands up and just flipped the table over, and I'm just like, wow, that's, you know, I don't know. I personally, I don't think that that's the way to get what you want, you know. So yeah, definitely some bad behavior.
Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, talking about like communicating with the crew, like how do you kind of like instill trust in them, and like for them to trust you? Like, do you go around and like talk to people or shake hands or say hello, like be nice? Like, what is the kind of trick or like the technique that you kind of use to make sure that everybody like knows, like, first of all, who you are and like what you want? And like, is it about, I guess you can't work with the same people all the time, but sometimes like just when you first meet somebody, like what do you say and like how do you introduce yourself?
Yeah. I definitely am like a kill them with kindness kind of person, where I feel like I try to be really nice to the crew. I try to be understanding to what they have to do or what they're dealing with. You know, if it's like a big giant dolly shot and they got to lay 100 feet of track, like I know that that's hard work, and I want to let them know that I know as well. And so I would say, I mean, definitely earlier on and probably still now, it's like I'm, you know, quite a bit younger than some of the crew on the jobs. You know, camera, the grip, or the gaffer. And sometimes it takes, I think, a minute for me to maybe win them over. But I just think it's just being nice to people, respecting them, you know. And it's like, I had a director tell me once that, you know, it's like as a director, you're not really like herding sheep, but it's like you kind of have these boundaries that you set, you know, in terms of what you want, and then you're just kind of slowly guiding people in, you know, you're kind of like guiding it in. And I feel like if you just kind of like snap at someone or get really mad at someone, it's like, well, that's not helping. You know, you just need to kind of rein them in a little bit, and, you know, and trying to get because all you're trying to do is get the director's vision on the screen. And to me, the best way to do that is to just be nice to the crew, be very personal. And, you know, and sometimes that's showing them references, you know, that's being very specific. Every kind of person I think needs, sometimes I feel like I'm, you know, the crew's therapist sometimes, where it's like, okay, this person needs this person needs this person needs this to get, you know, their best work out. So yeah, I mean, I introduce myself. I feel like I try to know everybody's name as soon as possible. And I try to, I'm kind of one of those people where it's like when we get the shot and if it's not working, I first start off with everything I like about it. It's like, okay, well, I like the speed, I like, you know, the angle here, but I don't like this and this, so let's work on this. So I try to like give some positive reinforcement along with some kind of criticism, and try not to, you know, offend someone in terms of like, you know, like, I don't like your work. It's like, no, 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 we're still working on it. Like, you know, it's a process. So that's kind of my general approach, is I try to be as nice as possible with everyone, and understand that, you know, I feel like that you're going to get the best out of someone, whatever position that is, if you give them freedom to do what they do best. I mean, this is their craft, you know, even down to the sound person, the gaffer, the key grip, the dolly grip. They've spent pretty much their whole life perfecting this specific craft. And so to me, it's like, give them room to work, give them room to offer suggestions, give them room to perform at their best. And then when it's not quite aligning with your vision, you just kind of guide them back in a little bit. And so I feel like that's just kind of my general philosophy of working with crew members, is because I know I don't push a dolly every day, and I respect that person that does. But, you know, it's like, maybe the way that I suggested the first time is totally not the best way to do it. You know, they'll have an idea of like how to feather the dolly or whatever. And so I try to always give crew members room to do what they do best, and then guide them from there.
And then what about like the relationship with the director? Like when you first get brought on to a project, or you have an interview maybe with the director about the project, what kind of things are you talking about, and what kind of questions are you asking? And do you use like references, or like what kind of thing are you trying to like bring out of the director to figure out like what they want and what they're trying to achieve with their project?
Yeah, I think the first thing is trying to get into the director's head, understand what their vision is, because I feel like my job as a director of photography is to put their vision on screen, and to try and figure out, you know, what is it they want. And sometimes some directors are extremely articulate. Sometimes they know exactly what they want. Other times they're also figuring it out, you know, as they go, which is okay. But for me, it's trying to extract that. And I feel like I can get really down with any style. Like I can, you know, let's go handheld, move the camera the whole time. The camera doesn't stop moving. You know, we're doing sweeping moves. It's crazy. Or I can get down with one locked off shot, you know, that's really composed for the whole time. I feel like I kind of love it all. And so my first thing is I want to know where they're coming from, what they like, and what they want to see on screen. I think sometimes it takes a minute. I like references. I like shot references, you know, whether it's stills or I rip a lot of Blu-rays at home, and then, you know, cut scenes out and shots and specific dolly moves. And I like using those as references. And so I feel like it's my job to try and pull out everything I can to give me a better idea of how they like to shoot, or how they want it to be seen. There's a director I work with, and he mostly does studio work. This isn't car stuff, but it's like we do a lot of previs, and now he'll bring me into the previs process, which is really awesome. And because I'll sit there, and while he's working in Maya or whatever it is, pre-visualizing what the set is, you know, we'll walk in on the first shoot day, and he's like, okay, 25 mil, you know, 4 feet off the ground, 18 feet from the back wall, this is the shot. And you know, and we set it there, and it's exactly how he prevised it, and the set's perfect. And it's like, you know, that's one way of working. And I like that. I like working that way as well. I also like, you know, well, we'll figure it out. This is kind of the vibe. Let's just go for it. And so I can work both ways, but to me, it's all about trying to get the director's vision kind of out of their head and into a place that we can kind of use in terms of like visual references or anything like that, to try and achieve that.
And how long is like the conversation, or like the pre-production process? Like I'm sure it varies every project, but in general, like how long do you spend like discussing the look and then figuring out what you want to achieve, and then when you're on set, there's less surprises, hopefully?
It depends on the project. I mean, I work mostly in commercials, so my projects will come up like sometimes a week or two in advance, sometimes very rarely like a month in advance. So I feel like there's like 2 to 3 weeks before a job is usually when I kind of get brought on. So the pre-production process, it's interesting. It depends on the director. I know some directors where we'll have a lot of conversations beforehand. You know, we'll talk every other day. We'll send each other stuff all the time. You know, we'll recommend movies to each other and then watch them and then talk about them. Sometimes it's pretty locked in. It just kind of depends on how loose the creative is. I would say with studio jobs, it's like, you know, and especially if we can pre-visit, then it's great because we have all of this kind of information already where it's like, okay, we know we're going to build the sets, so we want it like this, and we know the color palette and all that, but it kind of depends. I would say it's like usually a week or two of kind of prep, and then depending on how long the job is, you know, 2 days, 4 days or whatever.
You mentioned like earlier on through film school, you met some directors and you were able to get some commercials. How were you able to like build upon that, like after film school? Like how were you able to meet new directors or get the next job and kind of like build from there?
I think it was a little tough in the beginning. You know, it's like you're shooting. For me, I was shooting just kind of small music videos, and it's kind of all just about who they know. You know, that director has a friend who also is directing something. You know, maybe directing a commercial or a small music video, and then it's like, you know, I'm available, and then you kind of start shooting for them, and so it just kind of starts to snowball a little bit. I think it got to the point where I started to actually work on commercials pretty consistently, and through people I knew, and then it was kind of like, okay, I should probably get an agent.
So the McLaren, was that after the BMW commercial?
Yeah,
like
I think that was the second one we did.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that project?
Yeah, McLaren was interesting. It was shot in Spain, in Almeria. It was in an old Western town. I think they would film spaghetti Westerns there and stuff. And so we filmed it there, and I don't think we could afford 2 shoot days because we kind of only wanted to shoot. The whole idea was that this McLaren is racing towards the sun, and we couldn't shoot 2 days in a row. So we're like, okay, what if we shot sunset and sunrise, and then maybe we could do something in the middle of the night, like basically not do much, but like, I don't know, maybe we can shoot some sort of abstract something. And so we shot sunset, and then I noticed that it was gonna be a full moon that night, and I just kind of bought this Sony A7S, and I started doing experiments with shooting only in moonlight. And so basically we had the Alexa with I think it was an Angenieux zoom that I put an anamorphic back onto, and then I mounted a Sony A7S with an anamorphic lens and a PL mount on top of the Alexa. And so we shot with the Alexa at sunset and sunrise, and then at nighttime during the full moon, we actually, with the arm card, shot car to car with the A7S, which is kind of crazy. And it was cool. It was abstract. It was weird. But that was interesting because when we first started, we had a helicopter as well. And we had I think it was an Audi station wagon, I believe. And it didn't have a crane on it, but it had a fixed post with a stabilized head on the fixed post. And so you could kind of move it from the front or the back, but you couldn't, it didn't have a crane. And so we did a few runs at sunset, and then all of a sudden we were like, oh, what if we get a little further away? And we're out in the middle of the desert. And I remember the driver of the insert car, he was like, yeah, let's go. And so we did it, and our insert car bottomed out, and it just ripped the whole bottom of the car off. Like it ripped the whole oil pan off, and it just dumped oil. And then all of a sudden we're there, and the sun is setting, and we just, gutted our insert vehicle. And so it was like, okay, so we jump in the helicopter, and at least we had a helicopter, and we started shooting with the helicopter, kind of aerial shots. And the key grip went into town, or production went into town. I mean, we're pretty like far out from even this small town. and they found like a Nissan truck, and the grips basically rigged the whole camera post and everything onto the back of the Nissan, and re-rigged it into this truck. And so at nighttime, we were driving around in this Nissan truck now, shooting the McLaren, and then into the sunrise as well. So it was a pretty wild job, but it was fun.
I was gonna say, like, was that McLaren's car like driving on the dirt? Like they let you do that?
I'm surprised. You know, we had to grade the whole thing. They had to like scrape it with tractors, I believe, the day before. It's still like, you know, it's still a little wavy, and even when I watch the commercial now, I can see the McLaren kind of bouncing, and I'm like, ew. But yeah, I was a little surprised that they wanted that or did that, but it was cool. It was definitely a fun job.
From the helicopter, did you have like a special head, or were you like handheld? Like, how did you capture the helicopter shots?
They had a stabilized head on the bottom. I don't remember what it was at the time. There was also a camera operator. I mean, I like doing all the operating myself, but this one is kind of like I mean, the idea was to kind of shoot simultaneously, so we had an additional operator in that one. And that was one of the times where the pilot of the helicopter, I don't think, had done much film stuff before, so it was definitely challenging. There's a little bit of a language barrier, but it would just like, I don't know what they did before. I mean, they're a helicopter pilot, they're experienced, but they hadn't done film. And with film, it's specific, you know, in terms of timings. You know, it's like you want to start the camera first, and then the car goes, you know, and then you're kind of like timed up. And every time it was like the car would go, and then the helicopter would go, and it'd be like, no, okay, we're gonna like do the helicopter first, and then we're gonna do the car, you know. And it was like, I remember really struggling with the timing, and that was one of the first things I started to learn with shooting cars, is that when you have a team that's like really experienced with shooting cars, they can hit the timing much easier and much faster, and you can get a lot more. And this was a case where the helicopter pilot wasn't as experienced in flying, but not in film. So it was definitely challenging, that part was.
And then especially doing it at sunset, like did you rehearse it with maybe a different vehicle first, or?
No, we just went for it. I think after
in the daytime, like before the sun had set, like.
No, we just went for it. Yeah, because I think we kind of we got there like not too long before sunset, and then we ripped the bottom of a car off because it bottomed out on basically a pothole that we didn't see. And then all of a sudden it just turned into kind of chaos mode, and then it's like, okay, just jump into the helicopter and just start shooting, you know. And then I think we only got the helicopter at sunset, and then sunrise we were just shooting car to car again on the ground.
Was that like an agency job? Like,
yes. And what was the agency? I don't remember the agency.
And were they there on set, like looking at the chaos?
They were, yeah, they were. But it was like, even, you know, I feel like that's like chaos internally, but then like kind of for them, it didn't maybe seem as bad, you know, because it was still like, okay, well, we're pivoting, we're going on this, we're shooting this, and still getting good stuff. So it's still like, I don't think the chaos got to them quite as much, you know.
Well, yeah, nobody sees that side of it when
yeah,
you just see the end product, like, oh, everything's fine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, or when we're in the camera car, you know, like freaking out, it's like they don't hear that or know that. So, yeah. And it's also tough because you're out in like a giant desert, and so Video Village and where all the production stuff is like way off over there, you know, and we're shooting over here. And it was kind of one of those things where since you're getting such wide expansive shots, you know, it's like you got to have everyone really far away, so that kind of helped probably buffer them from the chaos a little bit.
And then, so did that McLaren job lead to more work? Was like, there's one on your Vimeo called Audi Going Home. Was that the next project?
Yeah, I don't remember if that was the next one, but I guess it was. These are all a while ago. Yeah, I mean, after that, Chris started to get a lot of car jobs, and I think we just did a Porsche job a month or so ago, and we were counting them up, and I was like, I think that was like our 35th job together now with that director. So we've done quite a few, but I think Audi Going Home was the next one. that was in Ukraine. That was fun. It was definitely challenging because it was all at night. I wish that we had the cameras we do now back then, because that was like Alexa, and it was like right on the edge, I remember, of exposure. And then nowadays, you know, with the Venice or something where you can pump it up to 2500, 3200, no problem. Would have definitely benefited from that one. But that was like all nighttime city driving, and that was definitely a little challenging lighting wise, a little bit. Yeah.
And then there's one on your Vimeo called Pennzoil My Car. What's the idea behind that?
That one was fun. That was probably one of my favorite shoots. That was kind of going back to movies that I loved as a kid. Days of Thunder with Tom Cruise. I don't know if you've seen it. It's a NASCAR movie, and I used to love that movie as a kid. And who did that? It was oh my god, I can't believe I'm blanking on the name.
Is that Tony Scott or someone?
Tony Scott. Yeah, Tony Scott. And so yeah, we did, basically it was NASCAR and IndyCar, and that we went to Charlotte, North Carolina, and went to the racetrack there, and that was really fun. We had Panavision anamorphic lenses, and I mean, I never been to a NASCAR race, but I definitely have like a new respect of stock car racing after doing that, because I mean, the turns alone are like 30-degree bank turns, and we were I think we're doing about 110 in the arm car around the track, and having Joey Logano, he was driving the NASCAR. That was probably the best like precision driver I've ever worked with. I've worked with some really good ones, but this guy he was like nailing exactly where we wanted the car, you know, at over 100 miles an hour, and then taking off, or we do counter moves, and I feel like he would just get, you know, almost within a foot of the camera and just perfectly, you know, nail that counter move. So it was really incredible to work with someone on that kind of level that can put the car wherever you want it, and that was just great. And also our stunt car driver, insert car driver, was amazing as well too. I think that was Filmotechnic that we used for that. But yeah, that was a job where it was funny on the opening scene where Joey's walking and like the little tubes are turning on. I remember I wanted some large HMIs to kind of shoot through those windows to kind of give like almost like the sun streak, and we couldn't afford HMIs. I remember we were way over on the lighting budget somehow, and so the gaffer was like, well, we can pull out, you know, some old tungsten like maxi brutes or 12 lights, maybe they're even Dinos, and I can line them up. And I was like, okay, like maybe we'll, you know, put some blue gel on them or something. But he turned them all on and you know, pushed them into the room, and I was like, oh wow, it was all of a sudden it just looked like sunset. You know, it's like this like deep orange kind of, you know, sun essentially that was coming in. And so it was kind of one of those mistakes where I feel like I was always defaulting to like, oh, I need HMIs, I need daylight balanced lights. And that was my first time I was like, ooh, maybe tungsten lights are actually like a really good daytime look, because it's like this like low setting sun. So that was, anyway, we did that. And then we shot at the IndyCar track, but at the Indianapolis 500, we weren't allowed on the track. So we had to shoot everything from, you know, the sidelines, but we got some cool anamorphic zooms. I think I wrote one at the 270 to 840 anamorphic zoom. And so I was just super long lens. And Chris, the director, he likes things that are like really visceral. He likes, I feel like he likes a lot of motion. He likes textures. He likes more abstract kind of stuff. And so whenever I'm shooting for him and also his editor, I'm always trying to grab as much abstract details as I can, because they'll always like throw them into any little place. And so I think one time we were working on one of our first jobs, and there was a guy and he was like writing with a pencil, you know, jotting down notes or whatever. And I was filming it, and he's like, I don't want to see him writing. I want to feel him writing. And I was like, okay, I get it. And so that's always like his kind of thing. And I feel like with Pennzoil, it was just all about just like getting textures and moving the camera fast. And it was definitely a really fun project. It was fun being at the NASCAR track shooting on that track.
And how did you get the shot of like it's bolted onto the car and the helmet, and he's like flying along the track? Was that like a green screen, or did you actually bolt it onto the car?
So the IndyCar, that was blue screen. We couldn't do that one practically, also because we couldn't get on the track. The stock car, we were actually in the car on the track. We had like full rain for that. And we actually did a few other rig shots, like on the wheel of the burnout, but you can't really tell in the edit. I mean, it's basically the wheel spins and it cuts, but it had this like kind of pretty crazy rig that comes out as like a couple feet from the car on the wheel to try and see it go on the track. But yeah, so the stock car, we actually did it for real in the car, and there were some really good rigging grips on that in North Carolina. Like they like knew how to rig to stock cars, like they do it all the time, and so some really good rigging grips for that. What else was I gonna say? Oh yeah, and then shooting the pit crew scene. I'll send you some behind the scenes photos and stuff, but watching that, someone took a video of me. I was basically running around as the car pulls up, and then all the guys come in and switching the tires, and doing that. And I just like almost got taken out by a tire. Like there's a dude that comes out and he's like swinging this massive tire, and I can see it right before he gets to me. He sees me and like falls down. But I was like, wow, I think I almost got taken out. But I love it. That was fun. I mean, it really made me want to shoot a NASCAR movie, to be honest, or a racing movie. And it's fun when there's just fast. I mean, it's like when there's fast moving stuff, it's always fun.
Exciting, yeah. What about like there's one called SKODA for whatever drives you. It's kind of like a rally car sliding around.
Yeah, that one was in Prague actually, and that was also really fun. And that driver was really great. It always really helps when you have a driver that's, it's like I've done some car commercials where might be the producer's friend, that's driving the picture car and they're just not hitting the marks. And you just, but the rally car driver was also one of those drivers where he was so good that he can like bring the car right up to the camera and then drop back, and just put it exactly where you want. And there was one where basically the rally car was coming towards us, and then essentially, kind of fishtails around this turn and goes away from us. And so it's kind of a counter move that then turned into a tracking move. And I think we broke a few filters on that one. I'll send you one of the clips. It basically goes around and then it looks like the lens shatters basically, but it's and thankfully we had a clear filter in front of it. But that was cool. I mean, we shot in the mountains with rain towers for kind of there's the bike riding scene going up. Chris also, he again really likes foreground objects and stuff. So anywhere we go, we try to find where we can find parallel roads with foreground objects. And with that one, I think we had the SKODA ambulance. And so we're like, okay, what can we get? So we just try to find any place we could with cars in the foreground. We'll even do it in a parking lot, just even set up a few cars in the parking lot and then just get, picture car and the insert car, the arm car, and then just try and get anything to break up the frame to try and get it to create some energy. So yeah, that one was in Barcelona and Prague. And it was good. We had drone as well on that. I think we put some anamorphic lenses on the drone. Yeah, it was definitely really fun. That one was challenging because, well, especially like the rain tower scene on the mountains. It was like, sun's dropping, we're losing light, we don't even have enough rain towers. I think we asked for like, I don't know, like a quarter mile of rain towers, and we got maybe half of that. So we had this like super short window of rain towers that we could only shoot in. And then obviously there was bike riders and they're getting tired because they're going up and down a mountain, all day. And but it was that one was good. That one was really fun to do.
And then there's one called Alfa Romeo Word to the Wise, and it's kind of intercut with Six Underground, like the Michael Bay movie. What was the story behind that? Like, did they ask you to try and match the film, or like, how did that work?
So that one, yeah, that one was interesting because I got a call from my agent that Michael Bay liked my work and wanted to maybe do a job. And I kind of was like, oh, okay, well, I'm not going to get that job. And then they're like, hey, you got it. Like, and I'm like, what? And so that job, I was definitely the most nervous for out of any job. I mean, Michael Bay was directing, and I was just like, how is this going to work out? And so I was definitely really nervous about going into it. And it was one of those jobs where I didn't get a lot of prep. It was like, I got the job 2 days later. I think I was like flying out. And it was all Michael Bay's cameras. So he had all of his reds. He shipped them to Panavision, but Panavision was out of, like, I don't know why, but they were out of they're so busy that they didn't have any gear left. They didn't have any lenses. So it was like, we were really like trying to like scrape. I mean, we didn't even have battery plates for the cameras. And so it was one of the only jobs that I went into where I felt completely unprepared. And I was like, okay, well, I have 5 of his red cameras that the AC is like trying to piece together, including his kind of green Bayhem camera. And Panavision doesn't have any accessories. And so I was like, okay, this is not going good. And so we prepped the cameras at Panavision. I went to Florida, and again, it was like, I hadn't even talked to him yet. I mean, we kept trying to get on the phone, but he was never available. He was still finishing Six Underground. And so we went on a tech scout, and it was pretty much us following him around. And so we did this whole tech scout, and he really wanted this Panavision anamorphic lens that we couldn't get. And it was currently on, I think, Bad Boys at the time. And so we're sitting at lunch, and then all of a sudden, like, his producer calls the producer on Bad Boys, and he's like, hey, like, I can get you that lens like tonight at like midnight, but we're not prepped for it. We don't have Panavision mounts on the cameras. We don't. And so I was like, oh gosh, like it's my favorite lens to shoot cars with too. It's the 37 to 85 anamorphic zoom, kind of wide zoom, or there's 2 different kinds. There's the 40 to 80 and then the 37 to 85. And I love shooting car to car on that anamorphic zoom. And so anyway, we get the lens, and we start call times before sunrise. And so it's like, I don't know, 4:35 in the morning, and I get to set, and the AC is like, they can't get the focus motors and the iris motors to like work with the lens. They don't have the right pitched gears or whatever. And so all of a sudden it's just like panic mode. And I'm like, oh boy, like this is not good. Like we're about to start shooting soon, and we can't even get this lens to work, And so I'm kind of panicking. I'm like, this is the most nervous I've ever been on a job. And thankfully, like 5 minutes before he shows up, it works. It's like fixed, and it's like, okay, thank God. They're like, sorry, you're not gonna have iris control. And I'm just like, I need iris control. Like, I don't, and so Michael Bay shows up, and he's ready to shoot. Like he shows up in his Porsche, and he is very much ready to shoot, and he's making that very clear to everyone. And so I'm in the back of the car, and he likes to operate himself. So he jumps in the arm car, and I'm sitting there, and I'm just kind of like, okay. And he gets on the walkie-talkie, and he just starts telling all the police officers to shut the bridge down. So all the police officers like race ahead. They shut the bridge down. They'll like do whatever they want for Michael Bay. It's kind of funny. And then we jump on the bridge, and then before we know it, we're going 80 miles an hour by the time we get onto the freeway, and going back and forth. And it was kind of cool because we like operated together. So he was operating the wheels, and then I was doing zoom, iris, roll, and I had a camera shaker too that I would mess with. And so basically, as we were shooting, he would just ask me to kind of fuck it up more and more. He's like, make it, crazier, and then I would zoom in, and I would shake it or roll it. And then we kind of got this rhythm to where we're just kind of operating together. And then we get to the end of it, he's like, all right, that was good. Let's do it again. And I'm like, okay. And so it kind of turned into, honestly, like one of the most fun days I've ever had on a film shoot. I mean, Michael Bay has a lot of energy. He likes to operate everything himself for the most part. But in the arm car, we would kind of dual operate, and it was great. We were having a good time, and basically we'd, you know, pull over, go somewhere else. He would grab his kind of Bayhem camera, shoot with that for a while, and then I would get another camera, you know, shoot another angle. We'd jump back in the arm car. It was, you know, one of the Alfa Romeos got stuck in the sand as it was trying to like drift around this corner. And then before you know it, Michael Bay jumps out of the car, and he's the first one pushing the car out of the sand. You know, he's like, come on, guys, come on, let's go. You know, and it's like, okay, like he jumps in and he's ready to go. And there was definitely some cool stuff that he was doing that I learned. Like he would have us line up a bunch of mirrors in the background and have some grips go there, and they would just basically hit the camera, like, you know, dead in the lens with the mirrors, and go on a really long zoom. And as the car would whip by, you know, we whip by all these mirrors, but it was going so fast that you couldn't see what was happening, but it's just all these flares, and, you know, and just kind of blow out or anything. And then we get like torches that you torch roofs down, and he would sit there, and, you know, someone underneath the cameras with a big torch, you know, getting heat coming up in front of the lens, and then mirrors, you know, 100 feet away, just directly into the lens. And so it was really fun to kind of watch that and kind of operate next to him like that. And I definitely learned a lot. He kind of he just wants it. He's really good at basically making every shot feel as energetic as possible. Like that's his whole goal, you know. And this was different. This is like a commercial as opposed to a narrative, but I mean, I think he approaches his feature films in a similar way. And we had this one shot that was rigged onto the back. We got like a Camaro or a Mustang, and he wanted a hard mount shot. And so his key grip would tell me that basically he rigs the shots. We go around, we shoot it. I think I jumped in the passenger seat, and I had a monitor, and we do it, and you come back and we watch it, and then he'd be like, no, you know, I want crazier. And so then the key grip would kind of take the support off of it, you know, like kind of undo a little support, and then the camera starts shaking a little more, and come back and be like, no, let's make it crazier. And kind of like, I mean, not to a point where it's unsafe, but to a point where it just starts creating all this vibration. So you got this hard rig shot that we're trying to peel apart to make it, you know, create more vibration, more shake, you know, kind of make it feel a little more visceral. Longer lens, you know, he's always all about long lens. And I feel like it was one of those days where I was like, okay, he's gonna do what he wants. There's no one that's gonna stop him, and I'm just kind of along for the ride. And so I would just like run over, you know, adjust his polarizer, run back, you know, jump on another camera. And it's always about everything we do. He would just be like, let's make it crazier, you know. And so that was a one wild day in Miami.
He lives up to the name Bayham.
It was Bayhem, yeah, for sure, yeah. He definitely lives up to his name. It was fun, and like I said, he knows what he wants, and he knows how to make an energetic shot. So I really enjoyed working with him. I thought it was fun.
Because some of the shots, like if you watch the 6 Underground, like you see like how overexposed some of the highlights are. It's like, okay, that's the style. So you kind of just have to let go sometimes with, all right, this is what he wants.
You do have to let go a little bit. I mean, I think that there were times where I would kind of look at a monitor, and then I'd run over and I would like adjust the iris a little bit, you know, or like switch the polarizer, shake it up a little bit. And yeah, I mean, for him, it's all about just kind of the visceral energy of it. And I respect that. I like that. You know, it's like, you know, don't get caught up on the details if it's perfectly exposed, but it's more about a feeling, which I think is kind of cool.
Yeah, I know he's been like criticized with some of the movies he's done with like the cameras too moving everywhere, like Transformers or something. It's like, what's happening? Or like just like certain scenes where it's just like pushing the camera here, swirling around. It's like, okay, we don't need to like move all the time, but I guess that's his style. Is just, but he does capture some cool shots, but it's like sometimes it's just a bit much for a movie to be always moving around.
Yeah, like Ambulance, I mean, there was a lot of FPV stuff and the camera gets crazy, but I don't know, like I said earlier, it's like I'm all about trying to get what the director wants or needs. You know, I'm totally down. It's like, okay, if that's the style, if that's like the film language for this particular project, like, yeah, let's go. Like, let's make it crazy. Let's try and, you know, really have an energy to it if that's what we're going for. So yeah, I'm all about it. I feel like, you know, if everyone did the same thing, you know, it'd be boring, but he's off doing, you know, kind of his own thing, and he's good at it. I mean, he's good at making really impressive shots and moving the camera in a really interesting way. I mean, like you said, like, you know, he has those classic kind of like dolly shots, those swirling shots and stuff. And it's like, he kind of invented a bit of a style himself, you know. Like I said, there was some stuff that we were doing on that commercial that I was like, wow, like that's, you know, that was a really great 2 seconds. Like in that shot and that thing, like, that was really impressive. And he can kind of do it with very little, but he knows kind of how to hit it. So it's impressive to watch, and it's definitely his style. Like I'm all about, like, if that's his style, that's his thing. Like, yeah, I support it. Let's do it.
Yeah, because I think he started off, I'm not sure if it was like with propaganda and like him and David Fincher and like doing all those commercials, and they both went off and did obviously different styles. But yeah, growing up or like building your reel or experience doing commercials, I guess you learn a lot because each shot is only small, like 1 or 2 seconds, depending on what kind of commercial it is. Obviously, you can do the long takes, but for the most part, they're only quick little short things where you're kind of catching these little moments in time and putting it to a larger edit.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting because I don't work in features. I would like to, but it's one thing is, like, I think in 2 second chunks. So it's like, I know that, you know, when I'm looking to get a shot for a commercial, like, I only really need to worry about 2 seconds. But then at the flip side, like, I'm also getting tired of that, where I'm like, oh, I'd love to have a shot that lasts more than 2 seconds, you know, in a film, because I like designing shots. I like long shots. I like, you know, deliberate moves and camera moves that maybe are slow or take a second. And so it's like in commercials, it's like, you know, sometimes we set up, or it happens all the time, we set up these big long shots, you know, and then you watch the edit and they don't even use when the dolly moved, you know, and then you had this kind of planned, orchestrated thing that never sees the light of day. But it's also interesting, and it definitely has shaped the way I look at things, where I'm like, okay, yeah, 2 second chunk, you know, that I need to worry about.
Talking about like the longer shots, there's a commercial called Toyota Corolla Greater Than Ever, and the first shot is like a 9-second shot with the lady walking towards the car.
Yeah.
But then after that, it's like cut. So it's like you kind of plan those shots and then hope they use it in the edit, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I didn't even think they were going to use the full turnaround in the opening. I thought they would just use, you know, her walking towards camera and then that's it, or walking away from camera. But yeah, I was surprised when I first saw the edit. I was like, okay, cool. You guys actually used the whole shot, you know.
There's other shots where they're walking towards the theater and then it's like a, what do you call it, speed ramp, and they speed it up and then it's like, and then cut. And it's like, do you think that's what they would do with everything? But then to see, oh, they didn't cut it. Oh, okay, cool.
I know, it's always a bit of a surprise sometimes. And I feel like even though you storyboard it, you prep and all that kind of stuff, and you think, you know, what it's going to be like in the edit, you know, the edit always changes things, or the editor has ideas or whatever. And yeah, so it's always kind of a bit of a surprise, especially in advertising, because I feel like there's a whole committee of people that are always, you know, giving input on, in terms of what the commercial needs to be at the end, and half the time the director isn't even involved, you know, in the edit.
Yeah, because I think the European market is different, but I know in America, like they say, is the agency just takes it and edits themselves, so you kind of like just, all right.
Yeah, which to me is the strangest thing ever. I don't understand that, because I'm like, the European way of the director is, I mean, because like Chris, for example, like when he's done with the job and he edits it, he's usually working in Europe. It's like his first edit that he gives them, it's like, this is what I think is the best edit, you know, and doesn't depend on necessarily the boards. Like, he's still trying to get the idea across. It's not like totally different, but sometimes it's different. And it's like, that to me seems like the way to do it, because a director knows what they were shooting for. And then, so to have somebody completely different step in and cut it, or oversee it like an agency, it just seems so strange to me, because it's kind of like having a DP not involved in color. Like sometimes I just get it. It's like where I keep bugging, like, oh, you know, let me know when you're doing color. Let me know when you're doing color. And like, oh, we finished it. Here you go. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's not how I was exposing it. I was exposing it to make it, you know, look a little different. So it's just so funny to me when you don't have those creatives that see it from start to finish. But I guess that's advertising, you know.
Yeah. And then going back to like Alfa Romeo, so one was with Michael Bay, and then there's another one called Beauty in Motion. Was that a different director?
Oh yeah, that was Warren Fisher.
So that's like two like one was a bit crazy, and then this one is very precise and like slow motion shots. So what was the kind of experience working with him on that one?
Yeah, Warren was fun to work with. That was that we did in LA. Yeah, it was kind of a mixture of phantom, so ultra slow motion kind of stuff, mixed with this kind of you know, not high speed. We shot high speed phantom stuff mixed with this kind of high energy Alfa Romeo stuff, and that was I believe Samuel was the driver on that one, who I think you spoke with. And he's a great precision driver, like really good. And that was cool because a lot of times on car commercials, they don't want you to go too crazy. I mean, it's probably a legal thing, but it's like, you know, they don't want you to obviously cross the line. They're not looking to have cars drift around corners and stuff like that. And so, but somehow we were up and down PCH and in Malibu Canyon, and we were just going crazy with the cars, you know, like what can we get them to do? And I think we even maybe mounted the Phantom. No, we just shot Alexa at 200 frames. I was like, we wanted to mount the Phantom to the ARM car, but ran out of time and didn't quite work out. But that was another situation where we really wanted, we had base camp where we shot all the interiors, like, you know, the tachometer and the speedometer and the foot pedal and kind of a little more visceral kind of like hand stuff. So we shot all that in a parking lot down by the beach. And then in the parking lot, we had the art department set up a bunch of delineators. So like kind of like those kind of skinny cones, you know, set up like 100 of them. And then we got the ARM car and the picture car, you know, put those in between to try and get some sort of fast action kind of, you know, foreground objects. And so we did that for that. And that one was good. It was definitely like shooting up and down PCH. I feel like when you're shooting really fast car stuff and you're moving the ARM car and the picture car, it's like that. I mean, that to me is the most fun, you know, when you can do something like that. And so it's sometimes it's kind of rare because, you know, you shoot, say like Corolla or something. It's like we were able to like sneak in that fast action stuff, but a lot of times it's like, you know, they 25 miles an hour, 30 miles an hour going down the road. It's like blinkered on, changes the lane, you know, and Alfa Romeo, like, let's just see how crazy we can get the cars. So that was fun.
There's another one on your Vimeo called Nissan GTR, and it's kind of mixes with race kind of track footage with
yeah, that was cool because we got kind of every generation car for that. So they brought in like the older, I think 80s car, the 2000s, and then the latest GTR, and that was in Ukraine. That was also with Chris, and that was one where I feel like we had a really good AD, and that was like timing was everything. Like basically we had this one shot where the GTR comes around a corner, and we're basically, the idea was that we're driving with the camera, the ARM car straight, and it's just an empty frame. And then all of a sudden this GTR kind of drifts into frame, and then we follow it. But the problem with that was we can't see where that GTR is coming from. Like we can't time it, or we can't visually time it because we can't even see the car. So all of a sudden, I mean, in a perfect world, camera car is, you know, going 40 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour, and then just at the right time, the GTR pulls in front. But, you know, if the camera car is too far forward, the GTR is obviously just going to slam into the side of it. So we had this really good AD who, this is kind of the first time that I had someone time this out really well, to where it's like, okay, we start really far apart, you know, we shoot it, and then the GTR comes in. It's like, okay, well, that was good. Obviously we didn't run into each other, and that was, but it's like really far away and it's boring. And then all of a sudden we just start moving the picture car or the insert car closer, the arm car closer and arm car closer, until finally we're at this point where we're comfortable. But it was definitely like, you're in this arm car going 40, 45 miles an hour towards an opening, and then you're like, I hope this car pulls out right at the right time, and then it drifts around the corner. But we had great locations. There's a bridge that they didn't complete in Ukraine, so it's just kind of like this bridge that goes halfway across the river. So we shot there, and then we were able to also mix a lot of different lenses. So we got like modern lenses for the new GTR, I think Cook anamorphics. We got some Hawk anamorphics for like the 2000, the blue one that's kind of drifting around in the kind of warehouse, that we're able to do like some cool camera rigging to. And then for I think it was the 80s one on the track, we were able to get some older Kawa anamorphics, and rig to the car there and stuff. Great crews in Ukraine. They're really cool, which is unfortunate that, what's happening now, but it was, Chris and I did a few car jobs in Ukraine, and it was always a really, really good time.
What about BMW, the distinctive decision? Can you talk a little bit about that job?
Sure. That was also another car commercial with Chris Morrish, and that one, as opposed to the McLaren one that I was talking about, we did have a helicopter in it, but this was these two, we also needed to shoot simultaneously. So we had an operator and a pilot, obviously, in the helicopter. And that pilot was the best I worked with. I think he was ex-military. He's worked on a lot of film shoots, and he knew where to put the helicopter and where to get the right shots. There was, we basically rode up with them, did a kind of scout, during the middle of the day while we're waiting for the light to burn off, did some rehearsals with the car going, and, going 100 miles an hour sideways, just like right over, as low as you can, and then lifting up right at the perfect times. And that was one of those times where, when you get crews that know how to work with cars really well and know where to put the camera, it makes a world of difference. And so the helicopter pilot on that was incredible. The operator was really, really good too. So I felt fortunate to work with them. And then it was a lot of arm car stuff. And again, it was just trying to find, trees to go into the foreground, anything to break it up, anything to kind of make it feel faster or more visceral. I think we used Panavision E-Series anamorphics on that, which are probably my favorite lenses that I like to use. They're like 80s anamorphics from Panavision. And to me, they're just kind of like the perfect, they got character, but they're not too clean, but they're not too soft. They're just kind of that perfect middle ground that I really like. And so we're using those. And we had a fun lighting setup in this tunnel. They wanted to shoot in this tunnel. They had to have a car in this tunnel, but it was just like pitch black. There's no lighting in the tunnel, maybe a few like floodlights or something. But I didn't think this was possible, but I asked production, like, can we rig, and this was before Asteratube, so I was like, can we rig Kino flows like all throughout the tunnel? And I like drew up this thing, and I was like, okay, it's gonna be like, I don't know, like 100 Kino flows, and then they got to run power, run ballasts, like, and it was kind of a big ordeal. And they said, yeah. And so we did it, and we basically rigged 100 Kino flows in there and shot in there at night. And I think it ended up looking pretty cool. It was pretty interesting. It's just kind of just like rays of light that are just passing by. And that was one of the only, I always shoot with zooms on the arm car, because I'm just always reframing, even if I don't want like a specific like zoom shot, I'm always hiding zoom in there when I'm operating, because I feel like, when you're shooting fast car to car, it's like, you cut off a little bit of the back, or they're too close. And so I'm always trying to sneak in zooms. And this is one of those cases where we couldn't get away with a zoom lens in there. We just didn't have enough light. I think we're on the red weapon, which I liked for a little bit of time there. And so anyway, we're on a prime lens, and it was, it was like flaring. And I feel like that, I don't know, I really liked how that tunnel came out, because that was something that I kind of pushed production for, and they went for it, and that's one of those things where I feel like working with production, I always try to be I don't like to over order gear. I don't like to order too much stuff. And I like to, you know, tell production that like, I'm not trying to like rack up the bills with all the equipment. I'm just trying to get what we need. And that was one thing where it's like, hey, I can maybe save some money over here. Like if you can help me, you know, get enough lighting for this tunnel to make it look good. And they went for it. So it was nice. But yeah, that was in South Africa. And I feel like that was, again, we were really fortunate to have a really great crew, because you're only as good as your crew is. You're only as good as, you know, the arm car driver, as the crane operator, as the helicopter pilot, you know. And so it was a really great crew, and I thought it was a good job.
So without those Kino, it would have just been pretty
sort of black. Yeah, it would have been headlights, and that's about it. Yeah, that's why I was kind of like, I mean, I've done stuff where we've had like other cars with lighting cars, basically with like lights on them, you know, or like rig a bunch of lights around them or something to try and like create some sort of ambient while we're shooting at night, you know, with car stuff. But this is a case where production was down to mount 100 Kino 2 in the tunnel.
It's always hard, like trying to match the headlights too. That's just, you just see some headlights, that's all.
Yeah, exactly. And also with shooting anamorphic at night, I've had issues where the headlights nowadays, they're so strong that they'll just flare.
The big flare, yeah.
Yeah, and then, you know, and that's not always great. And, you know, you want to see the car. So then all of a sudden you're like, you're bringing the camera up, and then now you have a not so great angle on the car because you're trying to get rid of the flare. So it's definitely something that I sometimes, even if we're shooting, say it's like an anamorphic job, I still will shoot spherical at night on the arm car, one for speed, but two for flare issues, because I think sometimes it just gets way too much, way too intense. I mean, I'm down to get crazy with it and have it flare, but I feel like you just gotta, I try to be clear about the fact that like, okay, well, it could get very flary, or if you have time to test it, that's always nice. But a lot of times you're in the middle of a job. You know, one time I was like, we shut down a bridge in San Francisco on this car job, and then we get on the road and we have one of those Panavision anamorphic zooms on the front, and then it's just flaring like crazy. And it's like, oh shit. It's like, we don't have time to go back to base camp and switch it to the spherical prime that we have. It's just too late, you know, it'll take 30 minutes. And so it's something that I'm cognizant of now, and I try to just like be very clear, you know, with either the director, and just try to tell them like, you know, this anamorphic's great, it's awesome at night, we get cool flares, but you know, it might be too hard to get the best angle on the car.
Just have a backup, yeah, learn from experience.
Exactly, yeah.
So what are your like goals for the future? Like, do you have anything you want to accomplish?
Yeah, I think I want to start moving into features. I mean, I think that's kind of my next move. I mean, I always wanted to work in feature films, and then I kind of fell into commercials, kind of documentaries, and that kept me busy and does keep me busy. And then it's like, now I'm starting to like, I want to get into features. And it's funny because I think in college, like I was saying earlier, when I had that friend that, you know, loaned me all these DVDs, and then I started getting really obsessed with this European cinema where, you know, the camera doesn't quite move as much. And I was like, oh, I love that. You know, it's like photography. It's like still photography. But then as I started shooting car commercials, honestly, I'm like, oh, actually, I think I can shoot action stuff. Like I like shooting action stuff. I like shooting fast stuff. I think I now understand a kind of visual language to create energy with the camera, create energy with camera movement, lighting, things like that. And so I want to get into features, and I'm actually pretty interested in maybe trying to do action films. I think that'd be kind of fun. I mean, I want to do it all. I want to do a small character piece in a house, but I also, now I feel like, I never thought this before, but after kind of doing car commercials, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll do some I think action would be fun. So anyway, that would maybe be the goal in the future, is to start making my way into the kind of narrative world.
So did you drop some hints with Michael Bay? Say, oh, if you need anyone?
I was like, you know, if you need even some second unit or something, you know, I'm around.
Yeah, here's my card. You got my number. So, yeah, he seems to be always busy doing something.
He does, yeah. I mean, and he also does small stuff like, I don't know if you've seen Pain and Gain, which I think is a hilarious movie, but I mean, that was one of his low budget kind of personal films. And I think he might have even put up some of the financing himself. So yeah, he's definitely like one of those ones that'll do, every movie is kind of on a massive scale, but he also can do these kind of smaller ones, which is kind of cool.
Cool. And like, as a last kind of thought, do you have any like advice for someone who wants to get into like being a director of photography on like commercials and specifically car related kind of commercials?
I think it's keep shooting, don't stop shooting, you know, make stuff. I think still photography is huge, you know, it's like something that you can do by yourself. Nobody's bothering you. You can shoot a roll of film, mess it all up, doesn't matter, you know, or get a couple good frames out of it and then just start to analyze like what you like about it, what you don't like about it. But I think the main thing is just to keep making stuff. And you don't have to show people anything if you don't like it, but the idea is that you can just kind of just exercise that muscle. You know, it's like at the end of the day, it's all about just decisions, you know, and when you're making something, and so the more you do it, the easier those decisions become and the less overwhelming they are, I think. Like, so when you get into these situations where it's like, oh, it's not quite looking how I want, you can kind of fall back on, oh, well, I remember, you know, you can move the camera to the left, move it to the right. You know, it's always like, there's always decisions to be made when you're creating things. And I feel like the more you do it, the less overwhelming those become. So yeah, my advice is just keep making stuff. With cars, it's interesting because you still do need a little bit of gear and stuff to shoot car stuff. Obviously, one, it can become dangerous if you're trying to shoot car stuff on your own. But you need a little bit of kit for it. And so, but that's okay. It's like you can start small. And nowadays, like with small cameras or small gimbals or anything, you know, you can suction cup it to a hood or whatever you want. And as long as you're safe, you can start to shoot stuff. You know, anyone kind of can at this point. And even with an iPhone, honestly, get a gimbal for an iPhone. And to me, it's like, it's also like, what do you like, you know, creatively, and whether that's, you know, in films or commercials or something. And if like whatever you gravitate towards, it's like, just break it down, analyze it, like watch that film, watch that commercial and pause it, you know, and look at it, and, you know, go a few frames forward and look at it and just start to analyze what you like about it. Is the lighting, is it the camera, is it, maybe it's the acting or the performance or whatever it is. To me, it's like whatever you are inspired by, just try to kind of pull it apart and analyze it the best you can. And then I think it kind of demystifies it a little bit. You know, it starts becoming a little more real and tangible, where you're like, oh, I mean, like the other day someone had a reference for No Country for Old Men. And I was like, okay. So I ripped the Blu-ray out of my computer and I was like going through stills, and I started capturing some stills, and I kind of paused it. And I'm like, I mean, I remember when I watched it, I'm just like, wow, this movie's incredibly beautiful. It's like really well lit. And when you pause it, I'm like, oh, okay, well, yeah, it looks like they just kind of had a light coming in through here. It looks like a little bit of negative here, and had a lamp back there. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I feel like I could light this scene like this. Like it doesn't seem, you know, as mysterious anymore. So I feel like for me, it's like, find what you like, break it down, and just start to understand it, and just keep shooting stuff. Even if you don't want to show anyone, you can shoot it. If you hate it, who cares? Do it again, try another one, you know. And it's just like to me, it's like a muscle that you just have to exercise. So that's my advice.